Alrighty. Oh, that'll do it. Let me switch over. Helps be on the right Instagram. Okay, there we go. Now we're rolling. Alrighty, welcome everybody. Okay, everybody's on now. Welcome back. Back making cookie jars. This will be a fun one. You know, I always like trimming, and this gets to be a little bit more technical with a lid, which is always fun. So we'll be working on these cookies jars again. Last week you saw me throw kind of the jar form and then also a lid shape. And so just kind of in an effort of time here, I pre-trimmed the lid and then I'll just basically finish it with the jar form. And so this is what the lid looks like before I trim it. And if you remember last time I used the large wood rib to measure all of the sizes. And so this fits almost perfectly. And I actually like it where it just is like a hair too big, because then I'll come back and trim the kind of the lip where the lid fits in just to get that perfect fit. So that will finish up for later. I took something like this and I'm going to set this aside. So I took something like that and then basically trimmed it into something like this with a it's not really a knob. I kind of like making styles like this because rather than having like a big tall knob to grab, just to keep it a little bit more low profile, I'll almost make like it's like a really exaggerated foot ring, or a large, it's just a little bit easier to grab onto, especially if you just want to do a quick grab, cookie grab there. So I trimmed this earlier. I put some slip on there, and then this fits almost exactly the same way, where it's just like a hair too big. And so that means after trimming the base itself, I'll come back and just sort of trim this to fit perfectly. So that's what we'll do right here. So I'll set this aside and we'll check on that in a bit. The first thing I'll do, and I'm going to tip this down so you can see outside of the comments, is we flip this over. And so this we're going to trim kind of like a normal pot. Let that ridge a little bit. And on this one, I'm just trying to center kind of like the mid shoulder here. And so I know we have a little bit of a bulge somewhere here, but this feels about good. Make sure this is down. Now it's always tough trying to keep this stuff sort of the right dryness over the course of a week. So it's a little bit on the dry side, but I think we'll be okay. If you hear a little bit of scratching, that's what's going on. I'll make sure to anchor this in. Okay. So the plan here, and it looks way off. That's because it was cut at a little bit of an angle. So the plan first is to sort of even this up. There's one side that's a little bit taller, so I'm just using the corner of the tool to kind of go over everything and clean it up. And you can tell this is centered right here, but the mass, when I pulled it off, got a little squished, which is fine. So we'll pick a spot and kind of go down the edge here. And with larger pieces like this, at least with mine, you know, there's always some level of wonkiness. Go. All right, so now I just want to kind of think about what shape we're going to be doing here. Oh, tool number. So this is I always start with the T1. So I started with the T1. This is the T6, just because I like that point. It's kind of right in the middle. So I use this a lot to kind of even things up. All right, so we're going to have a foot, you know, right about here. I think what will be neat is to have a little bit of a concave sort of swoosh foot, and then in this sort of thick part on the shoulder, I'm going to try to do some angular little rib shapes. So think about just like little triangular cuts, basically just trying to add a lot of angular detail. So we'll, just to kind of help maybe while you're seeing, so we'll move this down to, let's say here to here. You can kind of see, so I'll make this top section, turn that into the foot. This middle section, I'm going to do some angular trimming, and then right about here, we'll smooth that out going all the way towards the top of the piece. And so first thing I want to figure out is what kind of depth I have. So I'm going to use the T1, and we'll just start hollowing out the middle. And now this is a cookie jar, so I want to make sure to get as wide of a foot as I can. It's got to be stable, so when you're reaching in for the cookie, you know, if you're going like a quick grab or something like that, you don't want to bump it. You know, we want to make sure it's a very stable jar, so wider foot as possible. So I don't want to trim too much further in here. We will just work our way out. And I'm staying very rigid while I'm doing this, moving nice and slowly. And I'm working on the kick wheel just because it's, you know, you don't have to go all that fast, but I feel like you just have a little bit more control. And it's nice to just feel that momentum when you're trimming. And I know I don't have a ton of thickness, so I'm just going slowly to figure out where the bottom is. I'm just taking one layer off at a time. So I think we'll leave her there. It feels good. So now this is my sort of like the thinnest part in the middle. I know right about here, I'm also pretty thin, so I have all this clay to work with. So first, I know the inside of the jar has a slight kind of dome shape to it, so I'm going to match that. So we'll finish trimming here. And you can kind of hear the difference in tapping that as it gets closer to the edge. We have a little bit more we can take off. So that's good there. I'm going to add, I think I can make this foot a little bit wider. So I'm going to kind of split this in half and go down. Like that. That out. Okay, so we have a pretty tall foot. I want to keep that. We'll just square it up. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a concave shape to the outside. And for that, I still am using the T1. So I just use that little bit of an arc on there. That's sort of the dome half of the half dome. Makes for a nice curve. We'll just pick that up. And then before I get too far, I do like to just kind of round off the top. So this is the 301. And I'm just going very, very light. Basically what that does is it rounds out the foot, so you just have a really nice soft round. There's no sharp edges or anything. And this way, this edge is very smooth going up and all the way over. Okay, so I have the little bit of a dip here. I'm going to use the 101, and I'm going to make what kind of feels like some deeper lines. And I kind of switched between the 101 and the 104. So the 104 is that hook shape. And so what's nice about this is it does have a flat top, but also a sharp corner, so I can get right in here. And I'm just going to sort of square these up. Just like that. So it just looks like kind of ridges, but again, when it's flipped over, that'll look nice. And then I'll add a few little lines on the inside. And then for going down the side here, I'll usually pick something a little bit larger. So we'll try the 204. The large tools are great for anything, this size and up. And this is where you might hear it gets a little dry, but I'm going to just sort of smooth out this whole side. And then I will do a little bit of trimming once we flip it over, not too much. So I'm going to make sure that this is all good. And on here, I'm going almost all the way to the bottom. Trying to make sure this all has the same sort of curve to it. We'll finish it right there. And I just sort of flip back and forth between this one. I make sure to keep this nice and squared. And so this feels pretty good. I think I need one more pass. And then I want to sort of balance out all these ridges and lines towards the top of the piece. So I'm going to follow this curve down, and right where it sort of feels like there's a natural sort of inversion of the angle, or like there's a natural little piece down there, and I know that's getting tough to see. You will see the bottom when I flip it over, but I'm just making sure to stop right on this corner. Just like that. Okay, and then use a little metal rib, and I'm going to burnish just a few spots where I can. So this clay, it's an SRF, it's a aardvark clay. It fires kind of like this nice maroon, rusty, orange, brown. It throws nice, but it does have a little bit of grog in it. And so you notice that more when you're trimming. And so it's just kind of nice to come back, and it burnishes really well. You get a little bit of a smooth surface. So I like to try to do that. And you can use a metal rib here. I've used, little stones or rocks. Those are always fun. Like if you go visit somewhere and you go to a rock shop, there's always like a touristy rock shop, and you don't know what to do with rocks, but get a little rock and turn it into a polishing, stone. You can look for the right shapes to kind of get into corners and stuff. So that's always fun. But a metal rib works great. Okay. So now we'll slow her down, and I'm going to pop it off. Just like that. So this is kind of what the base looks like. You can see those ridges there. Flip it over. And so I trimmed right up until this kind of corner. It's in like an inside corner. So I'm going to finish that up on the top side. Just make sure we feel this out. So here I want it to hold, but not that hard. So I'm just going to get just a light layer of water. And here I'm wanting to center the edge, this top rim, because that's what I'm going to be trimming to fit the lid on. So that feels good, just like that. And so on this, I'm going to use all small tools because I don't want the pressure of like a larger blade on this edge, because I don't want to smush that foot that I just trimmed. I do want this to stick, so I'm going to see if I can get away with just using like the 104 right here. So it's got that flat top, and I'll come in and just sort of trim some sharp edges here. We'll square off the top. And remember that lid, is just barely too big. So this little lip in here, I'm gonna like hardly even widen it. It's more of just like clean it up, and that alone might be enough. And then on the inside of the lip, I'm going to square that up also. Okay, so we'll see how this fits. Those are little pieces. It should just sink right in there. And so the inside walls of that lip, they are angled just slightly. So as this lid kind of goes in, it wedges itself. And so here, that fits great. It's on the bottom. Now I can see, I can probably trim the top of this down a little bit just to lower it, not by much, but we know we've got a good fit in there. So we'll take this off. So I'm going to lower this top just a little bit. So we'll come in on the side. Do a little bit more. And then square it off. And then I do want to add a little bit of an angle, kind of a chamfered edge, so it doesn't look so square. And I'm just going slow because, again, I don't want to push this off. And I'm going to use that T1, that curve, just lightly. See if I can get a little bit of a concave shape here, just to match that foot. And then we got to add a few little ridges. So we'll put this in. Just like that. Okay, so now we can test our lid again. Here we go, and that is going to fit nice and snug right in there. So that's our lid on there. The only other thing we got to do is add a little bit of slip to this. And I'm using an orange and blue. So let's clean this up. Again, we'll tilt this down. So we'll do the orange first. There's not much left in here, so I got to make it kind of a little thin. But we'll go right kind of in the middle here. And I'm just going to use the rest of this because there's not much left. Got to make sure to get a little bit of a thicker layer on. And I'm going to blend it with the blue down below. So I'm just going to kind of fade this down, but I want to make sure that the top has kind of like the cleanest, most solid line of underglaze. Just kind of use the last of this as much as I can. Just like that. All right, so we'll clean that brush off. Okay, so now we'll do the blue. And the blue, I'm going to start at the bottom and kind of fade it up. That's the plan. So we do have more of this, so we'll just make sure to get a kind of a thick layer on. And I sort of leave the middle till last because you don't want to, if you work in an area too much, then you end up sort of, the clay gets wet, it kind of seeps through, especially a dark clay like this. So we'll add a little bit there, and then I want to get that bottom line all the way up against the little ridge down there. So there's sort of an edge. And we'll just go right up against that. Just like that. Okay, so now I'm going to close this up. And then I found to get a nice sort of blend between the colors. So right now the brush is blue, and I don't want to go too far, but I'm just going to sort of thin it out, I guess I would say, right in the middle. And then we'll wash the brush off. So squeeze that off. And then, so brush is pretty clean. I just want a tad bit of water. And now I'm going to go back over that middle spot, a little bit more water. And this, the goal is to sort of blend those two colors by going up and down. You'll see if I go too much, you're going to see a dark spot, and that's where it's actually wearing through the clay. So I think it'll be okay if I kind of leave it just like that, maybe blend it a little bit more. Because once it's carved, you don't, and it's sort of a bright color, you don't see those tiny little patches as much, but we'll leave it just like that. We'll hit it with the blowtorch, which is always fun. Try to do quiet. So I do this because I don't want to take it off the wheel while it's wet. And then I also trim a sort of a clean line on here. So I'm just using a blowtorch lightly on the, just kind of going up and down. And especially just trying to get the top and bottom edges that way. That way it dries out and we can do a little bit of a trimming, sort of clean line on there. And it doesn't take much. Right where, you might have a little, that wet brush to sort of blend things, you do get a lot of water on there. And so I try not to just blast it too much, but you do want it to dry out. And you can tell, so it'll kind of get a little bit lighter, and the very edges will almost turn white. And this is a fairly thin coat, so sometimes when I use slip, it's a little bit thicker, and you do have to hit it a little bit longer. But we got it good. Got it good there. So now I'll come back with that 104, that little corner, and I'm just going to clean up this line. So you'll see, just go lightly. right to there. So it's very subtle, but it leaves a really clean line. I'm gonna do the same thing on the bottom. Just like that. And sometimes I will add other lines, but because on the lid I did not. So the carving that I'll do here, I'll make sure to kind of utilize like the whole space of that. And then I also did it where the orange is on top on the jar, and on the lid, the orange is on the bottom. So it kind of looks like it goes from blue to orange to blue uh, as a whole piece. So you can kind of see those match. So we'll pull this off. There's always a little bit of, you can see steam coming out of here now. There's always some gunk in here to get out. And we should be able to pop this off lightly. Okay, so we got that. And we got the lid to go on there. Okay. So this is kind of what we have as the finished cookie jar. Looks like it's straight out of Winnie the Pooh. We'll be able to fit some good cookies in there. I am going to carve these. I think it's going to be tough to let them sit for another week. I'll see what I can. I'm going to carve one. I do have an extra one, and if I can get it wrapped up and stay sort of damp enough, then I'll do a carving demo next week. Otherwise, I'll show. We can do a little glazing next week, and I'll kind of show how I finish these up. We'll put them in the kiln and get to see the finished product again. So there you have it. That's how I trim jars. And again, this was just one style of lid. So the lid itself is just kind of like a little mini bowl plate, and the lid is simple. The jar itself is what's a little bit more technical to get that little edge in there. Other lids and stuff, they work a little bit differently. But this one I thought just sort of had that look of a classic cookie jar. So that's what we got. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoy that. If you got any questions, you can always comment and tell us what you're thinking, what you want to see more of. Again, I might have to finish these up just because they are drying out, and I want to make sure to get the carving done. But you'll definitely get to see the finished product. And yeah, so thanks for joining. Have a good rest of your week, and happy Tuesday. And yep, we'll see you next time.